I was a Hall of Famer in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, and I saw him. He came to my inductory.
Matthew Saad Muhammad lived one of boxing's most heartbreaking stories. Born Maxwell Antonio Loach, abandoned as a baby, raised in an orphanage, he clawed his way from absolute nothing to become light heavyweight champion of the world. His fights were wars. He didn't just beat opponents, he went through hell with them, trading bombs until someone couldn't continue. That kind of fighting takes a special courage, but it also creates enemies. Real enemies. The kind that leave permanent scars, both physical and emotional. Muhammad's hatred wasn't like other champions. He'd been betrayed too many times, used by too many people, hurt by too many so-called allies. The men who stepped into the ring with him weren't just competitors. Some became symbols of everything wrong with his life and career. Dirty fighters who tried to cripple him, rivals who disrespected his identity, managers who stole his money while he bled for their profit. Each enemy represented a different kind of pain. Today we're revealing the 6 boxers and forces that Matthew Saad Muhammad despised most deeply. These weren't simple sporting rivalries. They were personal wars fought by a man who'd already survived more hardship than most people could imagine. From violent betrayals to financial ruin, from stolen dignity to physical destruction. These are the feuds that broke the warrior's heart while he broke their faces. Let's dive in. 6. Vonzell Johnson. Vonzell Johnson didn't come to fight Matthew Saad Muhammad fairly. He came to hurt him by any means necessary. Their encounters in the late 1970s weren't boxing matches. They were street fights disguised as professional bouts. Johnson specialized in the dark arts of the ring. Headbutts that opened cuts, low blows that stole breath, elbows and forearms that left bruises for weeks. The referee's warnings meant nothing because Johnson never stopped. Muhammad hated fighters who couldn't win clean. He'd grown up with nothing, fought his way up honestly, believed in the purity of combat. Johnson represented the opposite philosophy. Winning didn't matter unless you could cheat your way there. Every clinch became an opportunity for Johnson to dig thumbs into Muhammad's ribs or rabbit punch the back of his head. The accumulation of illegal shots added up to serious damage. What made it worse was Johnson's attitude about his tactics. He didn't apologize or pretend they were accidents. In interviews, he'd laugh about his rough style, acting like physical intimidation was just a smart strategy. That shamelessness disgusted Muhammad. At least have the decency to hide your cowardice, he thought. But Johnson wore it like a badge of honor. Despite the dirty fighting, Muhammad beat Johnson every time they met. But victories felt hollow when you had to go to the hospital afterward. Johnson's headbutts left scars that never fully healed. His low blows caused lingering pain that affected Muhammad's training for months. Winning meant surviving, and that wasn't how championship boxing was supposed to work. The disrespect continued even after Johnson lost. He'd make excuses, claim the referee favored Muhammad, and suggest that without intervention, he would have won. Never once did he acknowledge that Muhammad was simply better. That refusal to give credit where it was due ate at Muhammad's pride. He'd overcome Johnson's cheating and still couldn't earn respect from the man he'd beaten. 5. Murray Sutherland. Murray Sutherland learned what happens when you underestimate Matthew Saad Muhammad's power, but he never accepted the lesson. Their 1979 fight ended with Sutherland unconscious on the canvas after Muhammad unleashed one of the most devastating combinations in light heavyweight history. The referee stopped it to save Sutherland's life, yet somehow Sutherland's team turned a brutal knockout into a conspiracy theory that haunted Muhammad for years. The complaints started immediately after Sutherland regained consciousness. His corner claimed the stoppage came too early, that their fighter wasn't really hurt, that the referee panicked. These arguments ignored the obvious. Sutherland was barely standing when the punches landed. His eyes glazed over, his legs failed, his guard dropped completely. The referee saved him from permanent brain damage, and they called it premature intervention. Sutherland's people took their complaints to the media, painting a picture of hometown favoritism. They suggested that fighting in Philadelphia gave Muhammad unfair advantages, that local officials protected their star at the expense of visiting challengers. The accusations questioned Muhammad's legitimacy as champion, implying he needed help to win. What infuriated Muhammad was the disrespect to his punching power. He'd dropped opponents throughout his career with similar combinations. His knockout ability was his greatest weapon, earned through thousands of hours hitting heavy bags until his knuckles bled. Sutherland's team essentially called it luck or referee assistance, rather than acknowledging Muhammad's devastating skill. 4. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. Eddie Mustafa Muhammad committed an unforgivable sin against Matthew Saad Muhammad. He attacked his identity. Both fighters converted to Islam and took Muslim names, but Eddie decided there could only be one Muhammad worthy of respect in the light heavyweight division. His campaign to delegitimize Matthew's name and religious commitment crossed lines that had nothing to do with boxing and everything to do with personal destruction. The verbal assault started in press conferences. Eddie questioned whether Matthew's conversion was genuine or just a marketing gimmick. He suggested that Matthew didn't understand Islam properly, didn't practice sincerely, didn't deserve to carry a Muslim name. These accusations struck at the core of Matthew's identity transformation. His conversion represented rebirth, escape from a painful past, connection to something larger than himself. Eddie positioned himself as the authentic Muhammad, the real Muslim warrior, while painting Matthew as a fraud riding on borrowed credibility. He'd reference Islamic teachings in interviews, challenging Matthew to debates about faith that had nothing to do with fighting. The strategy was brilliant and cruel. Make Matthew defend his spiritual legitimacy instead of focusing on boxing preparation. The psychological warfare expanded to Matthew's orphan background. Eddie's people spread rumors about Matthew's past, questioning his stability and mental health. They dug into painful history, exploiting vulnerabilities that Matthew had spent years trying to overcome. Every personal attack reopened old wounds that had barely healed. This wasn't competition, it was character assassination. 3. Dwight Muhammad Qawi. Dwight Muhammad Qawi didn't just defeat Matthew Saad Muhammad, he ended him. Their 1981 battle for the light heavyweight championship was one of the most savage fights in boxing history. For 10 rounds, they destroyed each other with punches that would have killed ordinary men. But in the 10th round, Qawi landed combinations that finally broke Muhammad's legendary toughness. The referee stopped it, and Matthew's reign ended in blood and brutality. The hatred started with how completely Qawi dominated that final round. Muhammad had survived wars with Marvin Johnson, had come back from the brink countless times, and had proven himself nearly indestructible. Qawi shattered that myth. He beat Muhammad so badly that for the first time in his career, Matthew looked fragile. That humiliation hurt worse than the physical beating. What followed the loss was even more painful. The boxing world moved on from Matthew immediately, as if his championship years meant nothing. Suddenly, all the attention shifted to Qawi. The same promoters who'd made millions off Muhammad's wars now treated him like yesterday's garbage. He'd given everything to the sport, left pieces of himself in every ring, and got discarded the moment someone better came along. The physical damage from that fight never fully healed. Muhammad's face absorbed punishment that night that changed him permanently. His reflexes slowed, his punch resistance deteriorated, his entire fighting style had to adjust because Qawi had broken something fundamental inside him. Every future fight reminded Matthew of what he'd lost in those 10 terrible rounds. 2. Marvin Johnson. Marvin Johnson and Matthew Saad Muhammad fought 3 times, and each battle took years off both men's lives. Their trilogy from 1979 to 1980 produced some of the most violent exchanges in boxing history. These weren't technical masterpieces. They were wars of attrition where pride mattered more than safety. The hatred between them grew with each encounter until it consumed everything else about their careers. The animosity began with their contrasting styles, creating maximum violence. Johnson was a devastating puncher with knockout power in both hands. Muhammad was an iron-chinned warrior who never stopped coming forward. When they collided, something had to give. The first fight ended with Muhammad stopping Johnson in the 8th round, but both men left with damage that required hospitalization. Johnson's complaints after that first loss planted seeds of lasting bitterness. He claimed the stoppage was premature, that Philadelphia officials favored the hometown fighter, that he'd been winning before the controversial ending. Those accusations suggested Muhammad couldn't beat him fairly. The disrespect motivated Muhammad to prove Johnson wrong even more viciously in the rematch. The second fight was somehow even more brutal. Muhammad knocked Johnson down multiple times before the referee mercifully ended it. Johnson's corner threw in the towel to save their fighter from permanent injury. But instead of accepting defeat gracefully, Johnson's team launched another media campaign about biased officiating. They demanded a third fight, convinced that neutral ground would expose Muhammad as a paper champion. The trilogy finale was absolute carnage. Both men fought with suicidal bravery, trading bombs with no regard for defense. Muhammad won again, but at what cost? His face was destroyed, his body battered, his brain rattled from absorbing Johnson's best shots. Johnson caused cumulative damage across 3 fights that shortened Muhammad's prime and accelerated his decline. 1. John Conte. John Conte wasn't just another opponent. He was the fighter who represented everything Saad Muhammad felt cheated out of. Conte held the WBC light heavyweight title during Muhammad's rise, and for years, the unification bout that should have happened never materialized. That missed opportunity haunted Muhammad because Conte had what he desperately wanted: international recognition, European glory, and the respect that came with being seen as the division's true king. The animosity began with Conte's refusal to give Muhammad a fair shot. Throughout the late 1970s, when both men held versions of the light heavyweight championship, Conte's team avoided serious negotiations for a unification clash. They made excuses about timing, money, and venue considerations. Those words dismissed years of brutal wars and hard-earned victories. Conte acted superior despite never proving himself against Muhammad directly. The arrogance was unbearable for someone who'd clawed up from absolute poverty to championship level. The financial aspect compounded the hatred. A Muhammad-Conte unification would have been massive, generating purses far beyond what Muhammad earned in his Philadelphia wars. Conte's avoidance cost Muhammad life-changing money that could have secured his future. Instead, Muhammad kept taking brutal domestic fights for smaller paydays, while Conte protected his status by fighting safer opposition in Europe. Saad Muhammad's story reminds us that boxing's cruelest enemies aren't always in the ring. Smash that subscribe button and drop a comment about which betrayal hurt him most. Stay tuned for more untold boxing stories.